All right, welcome to our live stream for Dragon Plus. If you were here for D&D News with Greg Tito the half hour before, he may have mentioned that Dice Camera Action is on a bit of a hiatus between the Strahd season and their upcoming season. They will be back September 19th, I believe, 4 weeks from now. So in the interim, we wanted to experiment with a second studio show following Dragon Talk, the success of that on Mondays. So for Dragon Plus, we thought we would do a bit more of a deep dive into the design, development, and running of D&D content, sort of a live-streamed magazine, as you will. And so we leaned into Dragon Plus for our name and also as some of our points of content. For this week, our guest is Adam Lee. Adam, would you care to introduce yourself? I know you've been on the live stream before, but for folks who might be new.
Sure, yeah. So Adam Lee, and I do story design and development for Dungeons & Dragons, along with game design and sundry other jobs that you encounter here at Wizards. So, yep, loving it.
It sounds like a dream job.
It is great, yeah. I mean, who thought that when I was a kid playing D&D with my brother, that later on I would be a part of making the books and adventures of this wonderful place, and here I am, and I'm loving it. So.
And you had done some story design, some creative content for Magic as well. Before
I worked on Magic as a freelance writer, world builder since Cold Snap. So that was 2006 maybe.
Wow.
And then I got brought in on Magic at 2010 and worked there for 4 years, working on the creative team, coming up with planeswalkers and worlds and game stuff. It was a great whirlwind experience that really honed my chops, and now here I am over in D&D helping out the team here, and kind of coming full circle to where I started. So, yeah.
So before we dive into the Tomb of Annihilation, yes, just to ask
before we go in there,
losing
our limbs on the way.
I wanted to ask, how was the Eclipse viewing yesterday? Because I know that you were in the path of totality.
Yes, it was it was a weird spur of the moment. It was probably about maybe 9 o'clock at night, and I looked at my wife, and we were talking about it, and I was like, "Do you want to just go there? You want to just go to the totality?" She's like, "All right, let's do it." So we got up at 4 a.m. and we took a car trip down to Oregon to this place called Kaiser, I think it is. We wound up at this little park. And I thought, going into it, you put on your glasses, you see the little chunk out of the sun. I was like, oh, that's really cool. It's amazing. Mm-hmm. And I'd always seen pictures of the total eclipse, and I always thought that was really cool. But when it actually happened and I took my glasses off, I found myself spontaneously just giggling and laughing and being astonished. It was amazing. Yeah.
When you take your glasses off, are you able to take off the Eclipse glasses when it's fully?
Yes.
Oh.
Yeah. When it's fully, you can take off your glasses. You can look at it, and it is truly like the black hole sun. It is just this black disk surrounded by the corona, which is like this sort of diaphanous energy that's coming off the sun. It's the solar wind, and you can actually see it.
Wow.
And it is mind-blowing and beautiful and awesome all at the same time. And I was astonished for the full 2 minutes. And then as the moon leaves, there is this piercing, pure light that comes from it. And they call it the diamond ring, because you have this sort of ring around it of a light, the halo, but then this bright, pure, beam of light that comes off it. And it's phenomenal. Of course, everybody in the park just goes into cheering, and, people are crying, and it's just this whole thing. But a great experience. I'm so glad I did it. And then there was like a 7-hour car ride back, because it was just nose to tail all the way. And that sucked. So it was like the sublime and then to the suck. And it was the whole spectrum. Yeah.
Well, the totality sounds like something out of a fantasy realm.
It was, totally. I'm going to put it in there somewhere.
I was going to say, it's got to spark some creative thoughts.
Yeah, there will be a totality of some sort. And then a traffic jam.
So let's talk about Tomb of Annihilation. So for your role on the story team, how did that work? How do you guys start generating ideas, and then how does that start translating into actual gameplay content?
Yeah,
at least for this campaign.
For this one, it's usually Chris Perkins, myself, and Richard Witters. And we came up with the idea that we're going to go back to Tomb of Horrors, and so we start talking about, okay, well, there's this, this amazing legendary tomb, this legendary module. How do we deal with it? And then, how are we going to top it? How are we going to enhance it? How do we stay true to it? So there's that part of it, which is like, how do we, do it again for 5th edition, make it awesome, keep fan expectation, on the level, and at the same time throw in a bunch of stuff that really delights them and makes them happy that we worked with it. The other part of it is, who are we going to bring in, if anybody. For some adventures, we're like, well, we can just do this one, and that's fine. But sometimes there are people that we know of in the community and creatives that we really want to work with, but we're also thinking about, are they a fit for the adventure that we're doing? Mm-hmm. And in this case, we thought of Pendleton Ward because we knew he was a big D&D fan, and also we knew that he had the kind of mind that we would want to, we thought we could really mine his ideas for this because this thing was all about traps and all about sort of old school D&D, which we knew he was a total old school guy. We also knew that he had this sort of twisted sense of humor, which is exactly what the Tomb of Horrors is and was. So once we kind of put those two things together, then we set the wheels in motion, and that kind of entails, at that time, Perkins Witters and myself, we all just sit in a room and we jam, coming up with ideas and getting things set for when Pendleton arrives. Mm-hmm. And then when he arrives, then we're like, okay, here's what we got. Now give it your sort of spin, and that was a crazy 3 days. It was a lot of fun, and it was a great time jamming with him. He's just got this unique kind of mind that was super fun to watch it work. And we'd be sitting in a meeting, and he would have his iPad out, and he'd just be drawing stuff and throwing in ideas every now and then. But generally, his process was to just give us drawings at the end of the day. And so,
no, I was going to say, if we could only track down some of those drawings.
Yeah, I think Perkins still has them as digital files. Yeah.
All right.
So if you ever want to see them, go swing by his desk.
I do. And so I suppose if we have the rights to some of those, we'll look to include them in a future issue of Dragon Plus.
We should. We better.
Yes. Yep. now we better. Now it's been said.
Yeah. So it was a lot of fun. And then once Pendleton left, we took all those ideas, and then we, kind of did some sort of post Pendleton brainstorming. And then Perkins gets his freelance team, and then he's off to the races with that. And I'm writing the story guide.
Nice. I like the idea now, though, of an NPC that can only communicate through drawings.
Yeah.
So whatever question you ask, he has to give you a sketch
it's just
back.
It just shows it up on this little chalkboard.
And you have to interpret what it actually means. So again, kind of steering back, the issue of Dragon Plus coming out at the end of the month, August 31st, I believe, is when issue 15 comes out. We're including a preview of Tomb of Annihilation, some of the excerpts, which I don't believe we've excerpted many pages up to this point.
Oh, really?
Well, we've done a lot of previews in our live stream.
Yeah.
We've allowed the groups to basically start through the adventure.
Yeah.
At least 2 of our live stream groups have gone through Dungrunglung. So in this issue, we wanted to do an excerpt, which I have right here, of the Dungrunglung encounter. For those who might not be familiar, this is one of the Grung village. The Grung village located somewhere in Schult that adventurers might come across as they search through for the lost city of Omu. Mm-hmm. So this was one of your ideations that came about.
Yeah.
So how did that, what was the idea there? What was the genesis of that, and how did it develop for you into an actual encounter?
Yeah. Well, I think, gosh, how did it come about? I think what happened was Perkins looked over at me and said, "Hey, do you want to write this section on the Grung?" And I was like, "Well, sure, I'll do that." So I kind of sat with it, and we'd done Grung in Volo's Guide. Mm-hmm. And so, after going through that entry again and again and just really kind of immersing myself in, what is this culture and what are the Grung like and what is their sort of shtick, I imagined them in the world that we were creating for Tomb of Annihilation, which was a world of zombies and undead, and it's very scary. And And the Grung, in spite of their evilness, they are pretty vulnerable. And zombies being sort of immune to poison and all that,
Right.
They weren't going to be affected. So how do they deal with that kind of a threat? So that's sort of what I had as the seed of my sort of adventure, that you were going to encounter them. You're going to encounter these evil, creepy little Grung. However, they've got a problem that they need to solve. And part of the sort of the players is, they're going to approach you in a very sort of opportunistic way. They're going to look at you and size you up, and are you easy game? Can they take you? Can they steal your stuff? But if you're strong, then they're like, well, maybe you can help us now.
Right.
You're strong and tough. You might be able to protect us against zombies. But there's also this other story that's going on in the Grung village, and I think that is that's sort of the special little recipe that I cooked up.
Is this the ceremony?
The ceremony, yeah. So it's king. The Grung village is ruled by a king, King Grok. Whether he's actual royalty or not, he just made himself that way. And I love the idea of these like sort of childlike despots. They're just they just love control, and they're total asses. And King Grok is one of those. And his poor, long-suffering village is dealing with his sort of oppressive rule and, trying to satisfy all his whims. And in this case, King Grok wants to woo Nang Nang, who is the Grung goddess. And he feels that if he can woo Nang Nang and have offspring with her, he will have these quasi-divine Grunglings. And that way he will perpetuate his line and be a supreme ruler. However, his top aides, Karuk and Rourke, they while they're subservient to him and they're trying to appease him, at the same time when they see the adventurers come, they're like, this is an opportunity to free ourselves from his yoke. And that is where the story begins.
So there's a couple of things that I wanted to kind of call out there. Sure. I love the fact, and maybe this, I suppose this is my question, when you are in a room together considering adventure design, encounter design, it's not, okay, well, here is a 10 by 10 room and let's put a monster in there.
Yeah.
And the adventurers are going to fight it and kill it.
Yeah.
It was very much, well, here is the setting and how would a monster fit in there and what is the ecology of that monster.
Yeah.
And then based on that, it sounds like, well, here's an encounter idea that just comes from how the oil and water tends to mix or not mix.
Yeah.
Is that something that you guys generally, R&D generally do in story creation, is take a look at the ecology and where the interactions might take shape?
Yeah. I mean, there's different flavors. I mean, some of it is like, when you get into world building and you're up to your eyeballs in it, and looking around, it's like the encounter can be very real to that world, where it's totally believable and it's exactly what that world would expect and you would expect being in that world. The other part is something ridiculous, something that's crazy, and D&D is so wonderful because it embraces both those spectrums. You can have something that's completely off the wall ridiculous and it's D&D, it's fun. So the other thing is that we're finding more and more that encounters where you don't just hack and slash your way through it all the time, encounters where, you could carve up the Grung village. You could go in there all blasting and fireballs and whatever you want and have a huge fight, and you might win and you might not. Who knows? But encounters where there's threat, but you role play your way through it, I think are way more interesting and fun than encounters where it's just like, let's just roll a bunch of dice and let's see who wins.
We're looking at a map of Dungrunglung as we speak, just for folks listening along to understand what you're looking at right now. Yeah,
so you're looking at the center part is actually the interior of that sort of idol monolith that you see in the upper right-hand corner. And it's sort of the... whether that is Nang Nang or King Grok, it's up to you, the DM, to decide whether it's a... it's
the best the Grungs could put together on their own, I imagine.
Yeah. But King Grok, he lives in the center of that. That's where his sort of, where he holds court. And the lake outside of it is just this, little Grung pool where they all sort of keep their their skin's nice and moist because they're little froglings. And then there's these like little Yoda huts that I called them around the edge, where the Grung families live and the warriors and all that. And then they've covered this, they've surrounded it with this maze, and that's mainly to keep the zombies out, because the zombies are wandering all things. And Grung typically don't build stuff like that, but
But just going back to here, they are in this environment.
Yeah.
This is what they would have to do.
How do they deal with it? So they've made this this thorn wall, and there are these creatures, the Grung Shapers. They're kind of sort of, they have like little bits of druidic power that they can use. They have created this wall to keep the zombies out, and as you navigate the maze, you will encounter wandering zombies in the middle of it, or zombies that are impaled on giant thorns, or the Grungs have laid traps, and some of the traps are just zombie pits. So yeah.
Now, is a zombie pit a pit that captures a zombie, or a pit that holds a zombie for other folks to fall on top of?
Yes, you fall into the zombie pit, and then you're devoured, or you fight at close quarters. So.
Now, Sean is in charge of the graphics right now and everything else. Do we have images from the original sketchwork that Adam had created?
Oh my gosh, yeah.
So we're going to put up a few more images as well to kind of take a look at. So this is, if you could walk us through a bit, some of your initial concepting for Dungrunglung.
Yeah, I mean, at first I was thinking of Dungrunglung being, because it's in the middle of the woods in this giant jungle, like, okay, they live in this sort of vertical space where they swing on vines and they clamber up in trees. And they've got these, the giant pieces of fungus that grow out of the side of trees. I thought that would make great, like, little places where they could stand and survey. But they live in, like, hollowed out. But I found that as I did that, I only had probably 4 pages to work with in the actual book itself. So that was, like, one of the constraints that I was running into. And to do something like this would take sectional maps. So I'm thinking, I'm going to have to draw a map of this whole thing, and how would I do that? And so that became kind of like a logistical problem.
Like a Ravenloft isometric version of a Grung village.
So I'm like, oh my gosh, that's going to take, I have to account for, budget and all that. So I'm like, all right, well, then I'm going to flatten that thing out. And on this page, I'm thinking about, like, in giant, how do the Grung live? Do they live in giant, like, bromeliads, or do they, and I was still playing around with the hollowed out tree idea with, like, little escape hatches where they can sneak out. Then I was thinking of, like, those, kind of like a carrion crawler, but it was this, I was watching, I think it was like the BBC Earth, and there were these, like, worms that would dangle these, like fluorescent threads, and little things would fly into them, and they'd stick, and then they'd, so it was like a carrion crawler. Yeah.
A bit of a cave fisher.
Yeah, cave fisher, yeah. So, I was playing around with that idea, but it, could be looking different. And, if part of this adventure was about swinging on vines and climbing vines, you could accidentally climb up a cave fisher and then be stuck, and then it would just reel you in and devour you. So how to make the jungle perilous. One of the monsters in this adventure is the jungle itself. There are, predators and dangerous things, and, all kinds of things that will kill you. Here was the other page that I think some of that stuff is there. It's a little hard to see, but it was...
It might be a bit hard to read. We did pull some of this from Dragon issue 14, so if folks are interested in downloading the PDFs directly, you could just go to dragonmag.com and look for the most recent issue out now. I know I'm making the hard sell for Dragon Plus, but...
It's awesome. Man, the amount of fun, awesome content in there is so worth it, and it's definitely something everybody should check out. And I'm not saying that just because...
you create a lot of the fun, awesome content.
No, it's really cool.
I would do a whole episode of the Dragon Plus live stream going back to the cats.
We should do that.
Now that we've got Tabaxi in the game.
No kidding.
But yes, so now moving on towards the evolution of what it looks more closely to what's in the book itself.
So here I am, getting more and more refined down. I think our concept artist who came in right as this stuff was happening, we hired him, Sean Wood. He actually came up with the idea of like, why don't they have this kind of crazy maze around them? So that was my sort of take on that. I was like, oh, that's a great idea.
Obo Crazy in the chat says they love tower defense games.
Yeah. Yeah, but I mean, that's the great thing about working here is like everybody you bump into in the halls and you just start talking a little bit about what you're doing, and you're just going to get these great, people that just have all kinds of awesome ideas. So that was just one of them that came out of this. You see the zombie pit there. There's, I was playing around with the thorn wall, but then I got down to the sort of the flat look of the map, that it's, not this sort of multi-level thing. So, yeah, and that's all just me working out thought process, finding out what works, what doesn't work, playing through it in my head and playing through it on paper, like, pretending that they're marching through the swamp. What are they going to encounter? And that's a lot of the process to get to a place where I feel like when somebody actually plays this part of the adventure, that the DMs are having fun and the players are having fun. I definitely want to have both sides have something to do, something that the DM is like, oh, this is going to be so fun to play, whether it's like, I want to, I can't wait to vocalize that character, like King Grok is total bastard and a total asshole. It's like, how to vocalize him. And I also want something for the players that when they're playing, they're faced with a challenge. Like, do we just kill these little suckers, or do we actually try to play along and go for the hard win, but the hard win that's more satisfying?
So I think I mentioned this to you offline. The two approaches that might be taken when folks come to Dungrunglung have both been attempted in the various live streams.
Oh, man.
So for
so happy.
viewers who might not be familiar with Dragon Friends, again, they live stream on Fridays. They took the burn it to the ground approach. So they did go through Dungrunglung. We're going to, I believe, vodcast that episode immediately after this leading up to Maze Arcana, if folks want to see.
I will watch
in action. But there was the other approach, the role-playing side of things that Force Grey took. Now, we haven't seen that yet, but I believe in about episode 8, they are running through the jungle and they get to the thorn wall. And by about episode 9 or 10, they're knee-deep in trying to work out the machinations of the ceremony that has to take place.
Oh, my.
Which is one of the reasons I wanted to excerpt
Spoilers.
this. Yeah, I wanted to excerpt this encounter in particular because it's some of my favorite bits from Force Grey, trying to work out exactly what it is.
That's been the fun thing, like knowing about like that there is a guy out there in the universe that is like Matt Mercer, who I know takes such joy and he does it well in playing those and portraying characters. That when I'm thinking about, coming up with characters like villains or NPCs, I'm thinking of both Perkins and Matt Mercer, like how are these guys going to play this character? And so it does, that's part of the bonus of it is seeing them come to life and seeing them portrayed well and seeing them either, die a glorious death or seeing them, cackle with glee as they defeat characters, yeah.
So for dungeon masters designing their own encounters, do you generally advise finding ways to make sure there's multiple approaches to an encounter? There's the straight-up combat approach, but there's also other approaches that might be considered. Yeah. Is that how you guys work as a team as you go into encounter design as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think every adventure we're doing for somebody who is new to D&D. Mm-hmm. Whether it's a big 256-page adventure or something small that we're putting out, we're doing it with the idea that you're coming into D&D for the first time, and we're going to make this as intuitive and as easy and as fun for you as possible. So we don't want to get super nuanced, but at the same time, we do want to at least give you two options. Mm-hmm. Sometimes, a fight's just going to be a fight, and that's fun. It breaks up. But there, for the overall adventure and for some of the higher, sort of NPC, when you're dealing with the big NPCs, then yeah, we're gonna throw in some different ways you can handle it. We're also going to throw in some stuff like a lot of our adventures have turned out to be kind of sandboxy. We don't sort of particularly go towards the things where you're on rails and it's like, you're going to go to point A, you're going to go to point B, and then point C. We like you go there and then the whole world is there. And you can go to that mountain because there's a dragon there. You can fight it, but you will die. But go for it, have at it, if you want. So it's broad spectrum.
No, it's great. I'm running Tomb of Annihilation myself as a campaign, and
sweet.
There is the initial starting point, Port Nyanzaru, but then branching out into the jungle, and there's various encounters you might or might not hit along the way.
Yeah,
it's very. I thought it was a well-done way to offer options and then kind of come back towards Omu near the end to fight the big baddie.
That's the thing where we brought in the guides, all the guides from, when you go to Port Nyanzaru and you're looking around, the jungle is this sort of super dangerous place. You don't, you need a guide to get in there. You can go into the jungle without a guide and you can walk around, but you will probably get killed, or you'll probably wander into some place that is way out of your level zone and you'll get killed. So the guides are there to kind of dissuade the players. The DM through the guide, can sort of push them in the right direction.
I'm excited because you made the perfect segue without me having to force it. I was going to ask about the guides, and Sean, we do have the images of Kawashima and Koopa that we'll put up right now. So that was one of the questions that I was going to ask, and you addressed it right there, was the concept of the guides in Tomb of Annihilation seems a bit different from other adventuring parties, which is, hey, we've got this. We're going to go it alone. We don't need help. But for Tomb of Annihilation, the guides feel like a new element that as an option for dungeon masters to help guide players through.
Yeah, I mean, Tomb of Annihilation has a ticking clock in it, and the ticking clock is that if you've been resurrected, you've got the death curse, so you're slowly rotting away, and time is of the essence. So the guides are, on one hand, there to help you kind of navigate through stuff. The guides are also a way, like I said, to keep you players from killing themselves, because one of the expectations of Tomb of Horrors is that it is a meat grinder. It's a death dungeon. When you're playing it, you're probably not going to make it. We wanted to keep that for this thing, but we didn't want it to be you're just gonna wind up dead. One of the things that we set out, though, is that you will be changed. You will be probably physically changed when you come back. You'll be missing an arm, a leg, eyes. You might have a duck foot. You might have a lobster claw. Like you might go in as an elf and come out as a dwarf. Like something was going to happen. It was going to be hilarious. And the thing about this adventure was that the big story was the epic death or the epic transformation you have. It wasn't sort of the epic victory you were going to get. So the guides were there to help sort of facilitate that, but also, if people got lost or they got way off course, the guides could kind of pull you back on.
So who are these two guides that we have up on screen right now?
So Kawashima and Koopa are Kawashima is a Chultan and native to Chult, and he has his buddy Koopa who's a veggie pygmy that harkens way back to Barrier Peaks. And we brought back a lot of interesting kind of monsters and creatures that hadn't been sort of seen for a while. And the veggie pygmy was one of them. And we thought, because this was a jungle setting, that veggie pygmy would be perfect. So they're buddies. And they work together as a guide team, and DMs can play them however they want. You can play them sort of like Rick and Morty, or you could play them like Abbott and Costello. It doesn't matter. Or you can play it as like Jay and Silent Bob. I think there's suggestions in there as to what their characters are like, but have at it.
It's again in the game I'm running. One of the more fun sessions had been just the players trying to hire the right guide for them.
Oh my gosh.
And doing the interviews and determining who was on the up and up and who wasn't, because they're not all super stupendous guides or altruistic.
That was one of the things we were talking about. It's like, I was saying, like, maybe some of these guys are just terrible. They're either terrible as guides or they're just terrible people. And so that was part of the fun, was like coming up with like, okay, here's the stalwart guy that's going to get you to the place, and they're really responsible and they're really good at their job. And then here's the guy that's just, a terrible person, and they don't take it seriously, and they don't care, and they're drunk half the time, and they're going to steal your stuff, and they're going to get you lost. And then there's the guy that are going to take you out in the jungle and slit your throat and sacrifice you to their snake god, and you can meet all of them.
So I chose those two to show off. The Tomb of Annihilation has a few, has 8 to 10, I believe, guys.
Yeah.
Kawashima and Koopa appear in a fiction piece in Dragon Plus as well.
Yeah.
That you wrote.
Yep.
So that's going to be in this issue as well. It's a bit of an introduction to those two guides and a bit of their background and their story and who they are in the world. My question would be, why did you choose those two to write a fiction piece about?
I think it was just sort of my mood at the time. I mean, there's all different kinds of. I mean, there's Ferrule and Gondolo, and there's a whole bunch of others.
Flask of Wine.
Yeah, Flask of Wine and River Mist. They would have been great, and I could have written about those. However, the mood I was in at that time was this space of. I'd recently gone on a backpacking trip into the woods, and just kind of had this experience of just being in nature, and coming from the noisy kind of society that we're in, and then going into this sort of beautiful, silent, back to nature kind of thing. And I thought, with Kawashima and Koopa, I had this idea in my head that Kawashima, he kind of lives in this Port Nyanzaro. He's grown up there in Chult. Mm-hmm. He's seen the influx of all these people coming in there from all different kind of strange cultures, and they're very noisy and different. And he's observing it all. And when he goes back into the woods, that's when he feels the most at home. However, the jungle is rapidly changing because of the death curses happening, and there's zombies all over. So it's become this very dangerous place, but there's still areas of great beauty. And in that jungle, he meets Koopa. And at the time he meets Koopa, Kawashima is a young man, and he's still trying to figure stuff out, doesn't know quite who he is yet. And Koopa is going to kind of be this sort of counterpart to him. Koopa is he speaks in sign language, so he's kind of embodies this silent forest sort of wisdom. And
can he draw instead of sign language?
That might be now a thing. I call him Wendleton Pord.
He builds pictures out of small twigs and vines.
That's right. He's like kind of this Pendleton Ward, like Edward James Olmos in Blade Runner mashup, where he's leaving origami stuff. But yeah, so that was playing around with that. So. And I was enjoying the heck out of it, so we'll see. And it, like we were saying, it's just one interpretation of this pair. I could write you a totally different story of the same crew and go in a completely other direction.
So I think we announced in a recent letter from the editor that we'll be doing the fiction in Dragon Plus had been a bit a one-off, which had been fun to create. We wanted to experiment with more of a through line.
Yeah.
So Kawashima and Koopa will appear in this issue, and I believe we'll be continuing the story for at least a couple of issues.
I'll keep them moving on, and we'll see what happens when they encounter perhaps people when they guide people through the jungle, and see how the cultures clash. And who knows? I haven't quite figured it out yet, but they're going somewhere.
They're in Chult.
Yeah,
they're going somewhere dangerous. So last in D&D news, we talked a bit about where Nanny Poo Poo got her name from.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Just to have sort of a goofy moniker, so she might be more approachable for party members who might actually need her help. For Kawashima and Koopa, and probably more particular for Dungrunglung as well. Where do you derive the names from?
Well, I think for Dungrunglung, that was a Perkins invention because he was like,
just rolled out.
Yeah, he was just like, I'm like, well, he's like, do you want to do this place? And I'm like, sure, that sounds good. And I'm like, well, what's it called? And he's like, Dungrunglung. All right, cool. That's awesome.
I like that he just had that chambered.
Yeah.
It's just Dungrunglung.
Yeah. So, and then I know Perkins also came with the Nanny Poo Poo. That was because he's just like, I think this is awesome. And I'm like, and as soon as he said, I'm like, that's awesome. You got to keep it. But with Kawashima and Koopa, I forget. Now it's all a blur as to which one of us came up with what names. But a lot of times, we think of sort of the culture that we're analoging it from in the real world. And so, I'll go to, online and just see a bunch of names from that culture and then try to take something from that and make sure that it doesn't already have a meaning to it. I have to change it in a way where it just becomes a nonsense word.
I had to change a name at the last minute for that reason.
Yeah. You never know, man. Yeah. Oh, my gosh.
Urban Dictionary warned me at the last second.
Alert. And then sometimes I go with a feeling. I feel like, what is this character's? Is this character an evil character? Are they greedy? Are they covetous? Are they noble? And so I found that there are noble sounding words. And I remember I did an article for Magic a while ago, and it was kind of like, Thak Orc, like that is an orc. And is like an elf. It's like these like frilly sounding words. It's a light diaphanous sort of fairy name, like Lethalarian. It's like, okay, that's going to be an elf. You're not going to have an orc named, Lethalarian. It'll be kind of counter weird. So there are words.
Boy named Sue type of situation.
Yeah, totally. But there are words that sound a certain way, and the more I've played with names and played with words, the more I can kind of get right into that groove and just kind of derive a name out of that. So
now, do you keep sort of an ongoing index of names that you might want to use someday?
Oh yeah. I've got like giant files of place names, adventure hooks, just cool character hooks, and names, all kinds of stuff. And weirdly enough, both my parents were from Liverpool, England, and there's just this massive slang dictionary that just comes from them. And crazy characters, from the pantomime days, that there were just nutty characters that got made up, and nicknames of like my grandfather's mates that he had over there. Like they're just the weirdest names. So every now and then I'll pull, like they had one like Little Bobby Spinner, like that was a name, Bobby Spinner, and it's like, well, wow, that's like a little halfling name, or so yeah, I've got all that stuff, in my head waiting to be put out on page.
I don't think I ever knew that.
Oh, yeah.
I'm familiar with, say, Cockney rhyming slang, but I've never heard of Liverpoolian, or is it Liverpoolian?
Well, Scouse. It's Scousers, yeah. The Scousers, yeah. Yeah, Liverpudlian. Like I had a big Liverpool accent when I was a little kid, and then I got teased ruthlessly. Oh. And that was it. Then I was like, my favorite superhero is Captain America. I'm going to talk like an American, and that was it. So, and then everybody's like, why'd you do it? And I'm like, well, hey.
Could you steer back into the accent if you needed to?
Yes, it can happen. If I go back to the old country and hang out with my cousins, then I'll be talking all Scouse again. Yeah.
So, I'm trying to figure out where Liverpool would go lead into Scouse as far as the.
Well, Scouse came from stew. It's like a beef stew that they call it a pan of Scouse. So if you have Scouse, it's like potatoes and carrots and celery and onions and beef. And blind Scouse is when you had tough times, you didn't have the beef. So if you have blind Scouse, it's just veggies. But Liverpool's a very strange place because it's a port, and everybody from all over the world came there.
Like Port Nyanzaru.
Like Port Nyanzaru. And therefore, you get this influx of different cultures. So consequently, Liverpool has in its slang words from Arabia, from India, from Southeast Asia, from all over the place. And you think, well, what's that weird word? And it's like, oh yeah, that came from the Arabic word from this. And it's like, oh my gosh, so very strange.
Wow,
but cool. Yeah.
I never knew that. The other thing I wanted to point out, just for the reason that we have them on the table, Greg opened up a booster pack of D&D minis from Tomb of Annihilation.
Sweet.
And of course, I wanted to pull out, we have some of the guides in this Tomb of Annihilation set. We do have Kawashi by name is one of the minis that's available. And then I don't know if Koopalue is, he is just named Vegapygmy, but he's Koopalue now.
That's right.
So I don't know. I'm just wondering how, again, going back to the oddity of being the kid who creates D&D now you get to do that for a living. How rewarding does it feel to have these NPCs that you create? And there's an actual physical representation of it now.
Yeah, it's immensely rewarding. It's very strange. I mean, Richard and I, we have this conversation every now and then, like
Richard Witters,
yeah, where we're talking about like, yeah, you remember when we were looking in the monster manual and we saw the Trampier, and and our minds were inspired by Keep on the Borderlands and Secrets of Salt Marsh. And now we're doing that for kids that are our age back then, and it's really humbling. It's like and I feel the sense of responsibility, like I'm creating, doing the best I can to create those kinds of really awesome, profound, fun experiences for kids. Like 11 when I got into it, I think I was probably 11 years old. And so when I'm writing this and when I'm coming up with these ideas, like I'm really thinking about that kid, who I was back then, and the kids who are reading it now, because I know how profoundly that changed my life, and it made me, it fired up my imagination. And when I read these modules and read these core books, I couldn't stop thinking about it, and I just wanted to make up stories, and I wanted to adventure, like the idea of adventure and the idea of spell casting and magic items. It, was just this, this world opened up. So as I'm doing this, I'm, part of my process is to get back into that space again, that world of wonder of a kid, so I can really like walk around in that world again and see, feel what it was like, and so it's it's a very strange, interesting, humbling. And I do definitely feel the responsibility of it. So yeah, I'm plowing forth and living this strange reality, but it's great. I mean, love it.
All reality is strange in its way. We did have a couple questions we solicited over Twitter in advance for folks on chat. If you did have any questions as well, feel free to send them in. Just please preface them with question in big caps so I can see them. But from Twitter, Carlos Berlitz had asked, what, in your opinion, would be the toughest part of Tomb of Annihilation's lore to adapt to outside of the Forgotten Realms?
Outside the Forgotten Realms. Well,
although it could be pretty adaptable.
Yeah, I mean, the original Tomb Horrors and Greyhawk. So I think everything works fundamentally without giving away too much of the meta physics of what the adventure is about. I think, metaphysically it works because it's in sort of the D&D multiverse rules. So, prime material and all that. I think it's pretty adaptable. I don't think there's any part where I really kind of bonk on it.
Right. It has to be. I mean, obviously we said it in Chult. We fleshed out Chult. You fleshed out Chult in glorious ways. But in theory, the Tomb of Horrors had been posited that it could be in various places.
Yeah.
So in the same way, I imagine ultimately a Sararak could have similar dungeons in various planes and locations that that might be of
and I think when you get your hands on the actual book, you'll then read, okay, here's what's going on. Here's why a Sararak is and can be in all these different locations. So we do explain it in the actual book, what's going on sort of metaphysically.
And I suppose the death curse, you would just need to apply that to whatever campaign setting you were interested in.
Yeah, and there is an explanation for why that death curse operates the way it does.
A question came in. Adam, why are you so cool? That might be more of a statement than a question, but throw that out.
My parents. Yeah.
Danny wants to know that.
Danny, I'm cool because you're awesome. You make me happy.
Realms Gamer asks how much time you spent researching previous edition material leading into Tomb of Annihilation, and if there's certain throwbacks or callbacks.
Yeah, I mean, definitely researching the actual Tomb of Horrors itself. Some of that is, my part on this process was kind of brainstorming, getting the story sort of pillars down, filling out NPCs and how the story was going to flow. And then the actual nitty-gritty of the writing of the adventure itself, that was Chris working with the freelancers. Mm-hmm. So we give the freelancers this giant document that we've come up with, and we hand it off to them and we say, go for it. And then they kind of bounce back and forth with Perkins. And so that part, I'm sure those freelancers who worked on it, they probably did a lot of their own research. Mm-hmm. And if they weren't already, just like D&D super goobs. Mm-hmm. When I approached it, I was like, went back into the module that I remembered and kind of refreshed up just to get sort of the vibe of it and get the feel of it so we can keep the spirit of it alive when we're kind of thinking about, like, how's this story going to flow and what are the characters doing and how does it play out.
One of the other questions from Twitter, I should have asked this as a follow-up. Sarek's particular machinations, again, if they could have been placed anywhere, any world mm-hmm. necessarily, as adaptable. For the Forgotten Realms in particular, why Chult?
Well, I think, we wanted to have this Indiana Jones pulp vibe to it, mm-hmm. and we hadn't done any, and sort of like we hadn't done anything in Chult for a while, and I think that place suited it best. When we think about the Sword Coast, we looked up and down and we're like, okay, we wanted to do this sort of like the Land of the Lost kind of feel where you got giant dinosaurs and you're in this sort of calderas and running around. And there was also this module, and the name I'm blanking on now, but it was sort of like this volcano. You might remember it. It was like a volcanic, jungle setting, and was like, oh, we might.
This is the Isle of Dread?
Isle of Dread, yes. So there was that name had gotten thrown out as well, like, oh, it could have this sort of Isle of Dread vibe. Mm-hmm. So kind of taking Indiana Jones, pulp, Isle of Dread, and smashing it all together, it just kind of spelled out Chult for us, and we're just like, okay, let's go there. That'd be cool. And it was kind of like far away enough where there were big patches of it that were kind of unknown, and you're like, whoa, nobody knows what's down in that area.
Yeah.
Whereas a lot of other areas of the Forgotten Realms is like, well, people kind of know what's going on. Like if something was going down, somebody would know about it.
There's areas of the Forgotten Realms people know exactly what's happening.
the not so forgotten realms. But no, this place is truly forgotten, and and it's realm.
That's one of the player supplements. Again, we're giving away as an excerpt is the player's map of Chult.
Sweet.
Which is, hey, we know the coastline and we know where the Port Nyanzaru is. There's a few camps along the interior that folks have gotten to, and then a big blank spot, which is completely unknown. So
make it up. Go explore.
A bit of a general question leading outside of Tomb of Annihilation, but probably a good one to get as we get near the end at 5 o'clock here. Roma asks, what advice might you give for a dungeon master interested in creating his own story? So if you're looking at creating your own, whether it's a campaign or a story for your players, like what sort of process do you go through?
Well, I mean, I think to keep it, find something that inspires you, find something that you're passionate about, find something that because the thing that will drive the story is your interest in it, and the thing that will drive the story is your passion about it. So come up with a theme, like write down a bunch of themes that you're really like, oh, I love the idea of transformation. Like that's a big theme. Somebody transforming from how does somebody fall from good to evil, or how does somebody get so much power that they want to control their people. So find something that really inspires you that way, and then start building around that. And usually that centers around a main villain, your antagonist, and that's one way you can do it. So get your villain, get sort of what their problem is and what their theme is, and sort of what you're passionate about, and then build it out that way. Another thing you can do is if you're doing a campaign setting, think of cities as characters. Think of an actual city and think of it like, well, this city is like a Han Solo. Mm-hmm. The whole city has a feel to it. A whole city has a vibe to it. and that city now, pair up with another city, and that city's got a different vibe, and those cities kind of interact with each other on this sort of adversarial level, or they may be companions, but then there's some other thing that's splitting them up. So you can play around with cities as characters. So that's one way to kind of approach it.
And again, Port Nyanzaru would be a Scouser if it were
totally
a person.
Yeah.
So.
And I mean it's kind of Liverpool. I think Liverpool nowadays is really cleaned up. I mean, however, it sticks to its roots. I haven't been there in a long time, so I haven't seen but I get reports back that it's. A lot of money's being put into it. Thanks to Paul McCartney as well. But Port Nyanzaru is definitely a character. And when you go into that city, you are going to get a feel for it, a feel of the strangeness of it, the feel for the experiment. All these people came together, and now they're just making this thing. And the city's growing organically by itself. You're going to get dinosaurs and that are walking down the streets, and different smells and different sounds of music and languages, and you're going to feel like a fish out of water, so which is part of the vibe, which makes you want to gravitate towards a guide and hopefully not get swindled and wind up dead.
Well, super cool. We are approaching 5 o'clock, the end of our inaugural Dragon Plus live stream. So again, for everyone who is participating in the chat, who's viewing, who's watching, thank you so much.
Yeah thank you.
Adam, thank you for your time and
my pleasure,
expertise on things. Again, for folks who are used to watching Dice Camera action at this time, they are on a hiatus between seasons. They will be returning in 4 weeks in mid-September. In the meantime, we'll be live streaming our Dragon Plus live stream. Continuing indefinitely, we'll just find another time when Dice Camera action comes back. Next week, on Tuesday, I believe we'll be having Chris Lindsay to talk some of the dungeon mastering and potentially touching on Grung as well. So
oh, Chris is a big Grung fan.
He ran a Grung adventure at Stream of Annihilation.
Yes.
So we'll ask him about creating adventures and his work with the DM's Guild and the Guild Adept program.
Yeah, you can thank Chris Lindsay for having Grung come back in the way that they've come back. Yes.
They're cool. Just the different varieties and the color schemes.
I love them. They're great.
So yes, again, thank you very much for watching, and I believe we'll be doing a vodcast of the Dragon Friends in Dungrunglung, so you can see that in action, and Maze Arcana at 7 p.m. So hopefully you'll continue to watch through the evening. Adam,
my friend,
thank you.
That was great.
Thank you.
Thanks.